that me? Is that, yeah, no.
Everyone in Hollywood is whispering about the story unfolding behind the glossy facades. What began as a love story between Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds is slowly unraveling into something darker, less romance, more calculated strategy. The cameras keep rolling, capturing smiles that no longer reach their eyes, masking a truth more shocking than any scripted plot twist. Blake Lively was once the golden girl, enchanting everyone with her grace, warmth, and that rare mix of intelligence and allure that made even the most powerful pause. Yet it wasn't fame or beauty that drew her to Ryan Reynolds. It was his mind, his razor-sharp humor, the electric banter that felt like their own secret language. Those around them saw it from the start, a connection that blurred the line between friendship and something dangerously deeper. She was captivated by the way he thought, by how he could turn every moment into a performance and every silence into a punchline. Deep down, she may have sensed he wasn't built for enduring love, yet she couldn't walk away. Together, they seemed able to control the story, to define perfection whenever cameras followed their every move. Hollywood crowned them its favorite couple, the witty husband, the glamorous wife, the flawless pair who could do no wrong. But as anyone knows, even perfection cracks when the lights go out. For Blake, that carefully curated image was everything, worth protecting at all costs. It had long ceased to be just about love. It was about legacy, reputation, and power. They weren't simply a couple who shared their lives. They were a carefully manufactured brand, one built on visible chemistry, witty banter, and Instagram captions that made millions of fans believe in a life of effortless happiness. Every public appearance, every smile, every laugh was meticulously crafted, a performance designed to maintain the illusion of perfection. Yet behind that polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show, revealing tensions that no publicist could spin or PR statement could fix. Ryan, whose on-screen persona was the embodiment of charm and relatability, had begun to reveal a different side when the cameras were off. Stories trickled out, small at first. Offhand remarks, subtle digs, moments of humor that felt less playful and more pointed. Fans laughed when he admitted, almost casually, to cursing Blake out in front of others, treating it like a quirk or part of an act. But there was an unsettling edge to it. Slowly, what had once been seen as harmless teasing started to feel like a glimpse of something darker. Control, dismissiveness, a lack of respect lurking beneath the charm. Observers debated endlessly whether these were jokes or warning signs. While Blake kept up her performance, smiling and maintaining the persona she had always perfected, even when it cost her private peace and emotional clarity. As whispers of tension grew louder, the world watched closely, hungry for cracks in the facade of a couple once deemed untouchable. Courtroom battles threatened to expose not just their private arguments, but also the schemes, compromises, and calculations behind the carefully curated lives they presented. Questions loomed. Was this the collapse of Hollywood's most polished illusion, or simply the opening act of a more complicated story? The days stretched into weeks, and the silence between them became heavier than any headline, louder than any paparazzi flash. What had once been playful teasing had hardened into avoidance. Shared moments on red carpets disappeared. Interviews became strategic exercises in omission, and fans were left piecing together fragments of behavior, trying to decipher the truth from the performance. And through it all, Blake carried on with her practiced grace, a living contradiction of vulnerability and fortitude, leaving everyone, fans, critics, and insiders alike, wondering just how much of what they saw had ever been real. Where is Blake? Why isn't Ryan there? As the tabloids scrambled to fill in the blanks with rumors of trouble in paradise, those closest to the couple knew that the cracks had been forming long before the cameras ever noticed. Blake had built her entire public persona on being composed, radiant, unshakable, a flawless figure of grace and poise. Every smile, every perfectly timed laugh, every public gesture had been meticulously curated to maintain the illusion of effortless happiness. Yet behind closed doors, the picture was far different. She was facing a man whose confidence had slowly morphed into control, whose charm increasingly carried an undercurrent of manipulation. Ryan had always been the type to command a room, to draw attention with humor and charisma, while subtly guiding every conversation, every perception, to serve his narrative. He knew how to make people laugh, how to charm, and how to bend situations to his advantage without anyone realizing it. Except now, that influence extended into the most intimate parts of Blake's life. But what happens when the person being managed is not a fan, a colleague, or a publicist, but his own wife? What happens when she begins to notice that perhaps she isn't part of the joke, but the subject of it? Those who worked closely with them say that Ryan's approach to their marriage had always been calculated, precise, and controlling. The notion that they should never be apart wasn't born from devotion, but from a quiet, simmering fear of losing control. That fear was pervasive, spilling over into Blake's career in ways that often went unnoticed by the public. Whenever she signed on to a new project, Ryan would appear on set unannounced. His presence, framed as supportive, often felt more like surveillance. He monitored every interaction, every scene, every rehearsal, and his polite smiles could not mask the simmering jealousy beneath. He could not bear the idea of Blake being paired romantically with another actor, even for a scripted scene. The jokes he made, once easily dismissed, sometimes carried a dangerous edge, leaving Blake tiptoeing around him, constantly balancing her ambition against his ego. That balance, once manageable, was rapidly eroding, leaving her in a constant state of tension and unease. Years ago, a photographer named Richard Fadek, covering the early days of Ryan and Blake's relationship, noticed a stark contrast between the public image and the private reality. What fans saw was a carefully choreographed performance, a display of affection and chemistry crafted for the camera lens. Behind the flashes, however, the energy was different. Fadek heard arguments, saw subtle confrontations, and eventually became the unintended target of their anger after capturing a photo of Ryan in his Deadpool costume. What began as a minor incident escalated quickly. Ryan accused Fadek of stalking and crossing invisible boundaries, turning a simple photo into a legal battle. Blake, siding with Ryan, provided statements that framed the photographer as a threat, lending credibility to the accusations. But when the case finally reached the courtroom, the truth began to diverge sharply from the carefully constructed narrative. The charges dissolved like smoke, leaving behind only questions. How far were Ryan and Blake willing to go to protect the illusion they had spent years building? How much of their public image was real, and how much was carefully orchestrated performance? Fadek would later describe Ryan as a man who thrived on control, someone capable of bending situations and perceptions to his will, always molding events to fit whatever narrative suited him at the time. Blake, he observed, was drawn to that power, entangled in its pull, even as it complicated her life and blurred the lines between love, loyalty, and autonomy. What began as a glamorous Hollywood romance gradually revealed itself as a complex web of influence, manipulation, and ambition. A story where appearances were everything, and truth was always negotiable. The couple's life, once celebrated for its charm and seeming perfection, had become a delicate dance of image, power, and control, a tension-filled performance that few could ever fully comprehend from the outside. She was young, impressionable, and she believed that being with him meant stability, strength, and success. What she didn't see at the time was that she was trading her freedom for the illusion of safety, exchanging autonomy for a carefully crafted story in which she was only a supporting character. And even when she began to realize it, she couldn't walk away. Because everything she had built, every achievement, every reputation, every carefully maintained public persona had become intertwined with him. Years later, those same patterns are resurfacing, but now under the unforgiving glare of the public eye. A legal battle that might once have been private has become a stage for something far larger than justice. It has evolved into a fight for control, a mirror reflecting the dynamics of their marriage itself, marked by denial, strategy, and quiet desperation. While Ryan maintains a carefully calculated distance in public appearances, he remains the unseen force driving every decision behind the scenes. Those who have watched the mechanisms of their world say the subpoenas, the money, the aggressive PR maneuvers, all of it bears his fingerprints. This isn't about defending Blake out of love. It's about protecting a brand, a shared empire, a life that cannot survive if one falls while the other stands. The irony is sharp. In their effort to preserve the illusion of perfection, they have revealed the very dysfunction they hoped to conceal. People who once idolized them as Hollywood's most grounded, enviable couple are now questioning everything. Were the interviews, the jokes, the family photos, every carefully staged image designed to feed a fantasy of flawless domesticity, ever genuine? Or was it all meticulously choreographed to keep the world from asking what was really happening behind closed gates? Now, as that fantasy begins to fracture and the raw, uncomfortable dynamics of power, control, and compromise emerge, Blake finds herself at a crossroads. She can continue protecting the man who built her public image, maintaining the illusion at the cost of her own peace, or she can finally confront the truth that her survival, her sense of self, and her future might depend on letting the entire carefully constructed facade burn down. That choice could define whether she remains entangled in the illusion or breaks free from it, once and for all. The deeper one examines their story, the more it becomes clear that the cracks in this marriage were never sudden. They were gradual, almost imperceptible, built over years of subtle manipulation, compromise disguised as devotion, and small, calculated acts that slowly tightened the bonds of control. For Ryan, everything has always been about the narrative, about shaping perception, directing attention, maintaining dominance. For Blake, everything has always been about being believed, about ensuring the world accepted the version of herself she presented. So when Ryan's public comments began to shift, from playful husband to pointed, sharp-tongued critic, it was never random. Every offbeat remark, every carefully aimed quip, became a shield and a tool, a way to steer attention, deflect scrutiny, and maintain control over a story that was increasingly on the brink of unraveling. While Blake quietly disappeared from the spotlight, Ryan filled the space with a constant, calculated noise, one moment joking about family life, the next making strange, offhand remarks about his wife, as if testing how far he could push before the public turned against him. Yet the truth wasn't just in what he said. It was in what he deliberately avoided. The red carpets where they once posed together, smiles perfectly synchronized, were now conspicuously empty. Interviews that once overflowed with affection and warmth were replaced with silence, awkward pauses, and carefully measured words. It was as though one partner had stopped moving in a perfectly choreographed dance while the music continued to play, indifferent to the faltering rhythm. Fans dissected every comment, tabloids speculated about every missing appearance, but those paying closer attention saw something far more telling. This wasn't simply two people falling apart. It was a story of one person attempting to maintain control over the narrative, even as it threatened to spiral beyond his grasp. Insiders began to notice that Ryan's decisions behind the scenes had become increasingly erratic, fueled by pressure, paranoia, and the relentless scrutiny of public opinion. This legal battle wasn't merely about reputation, it was about empire. His business ventures, investments, and cultivated image as the charming, masterful marketer were suddenly under the microscope. According to those who worked around him, Ryan couldn't risk the narrative shifting from genius to manipulator. Every move he made was designed to redirect attention, deflect blame, and preserve the carefully constructed perception of control. Every dollar spent on litigation, every aggressive PR maneuver, every strategic leak or statement was part of a calculated effort to shape reality to his advantage. And Blake, caught in the middle, became both his shield and his scapegoat. She was publicly the face of his defense, yet privately, she was a pawn in a larger strategy. She may have believed she was fighting for something righteous, something that belonged to her, but the longer the battle dragged on, the clearer it became that this wasn't her war. It was his. Like before, Ryan used every connection, every tactic, every ounce of influence to rewrite reality, ensuring that even if they lost in court, they would win in the court of public opinion. Those who once supported Blake began to notice the strain. It wasn't the kind of strain tabloids could glamorize. It wasn't red carpet makeup or a missed smile, but a quiet, gnawing exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying too much weight for too long. The lightness that once defined her presence and her smile was being replaced by something heavier, something almost imperceptibly tense. In private circles, whispers grew louder. She was beginning to question the cost of loyalty, questioning whether the same strength that once made her stand by Ryan was now the very thing that trapped her. Leaving him would mean dismantling the empire they had built together, a carefully constructed illusion of partnership and perfection that the world had come to admire. And yet, despite everything, in moments of vulnerability, she reportedly admitted to friends that she still believed in him, still believed in the idea that they were on the same side. But the mounting evidence, the constant pressure, and the endless compromises kept proving otherwise, forcing her to confront the painful reality. The story she thought she was a part of was no longer hers to write. Every strategic leak, every manipulative headline, every financial decision that tied her name to his ambitions, it all led her deeper into the web she had once helped him weave. And that is what makes their story so haunting. This isn't simply a tale of love, fame, or control. It is about the illusion of power, the subtle tyranny of appearances, and the cost of protecting an image long after the performance has become suffocating. When two people spend years meticulously crafting a brand built on perfection, they start to forget what real connection looks like. By the time they remember, it is often too late. The silence, the distance, the tension, the cracks, they all become part of the show, another act in an unending performance. And the audience continues to watch, waiting for the moment when one of them finally breaks character and reveals the truth. As this story hurtles toward its breaking point, the quiet behind the scenes feels heavier than ever. What was once a partnership now resembles a standoff, with neither willing to surrender control. Ryan has built an entire identity on being untouchable. The clever strategist, the charming businessman, the man who can turn any situation into a joke and walk away appearing smarter than everyone else. But the humor is no longer working. The charm that once captivated fans now reads as arrogance. People are starting to see the cracks in the carefully curated facade. And the more the public sees, the tighter he grips the narrative, determined to maintain control at all costs. Insiders report that Ryan is more frustrated than ever, watching public sympathy shift toward the very people he once believed he could outsmart has unsettled him, undermining his carefully constructed strategy. Attempts to frame the legal battle as a smear campaign no longer resonate because the evidence of manipulation is too visible, the timing too convenient. Meanwhile, Blake remains trapped in the middle. She must decide whether to keep defending him, protecting him from scrutiny, or finally let the story unfold without her input. Every day she remains silent, the world interprets her silence as agreement, and that very silence is slowly becoming her downfall. Those who knew Blake early on say her admiration for Ryan bordered on devotion. She once saw him as a mentor, someone who could teach her how to survive Hollywood, how to navigate the game and emerge victorious. Over time, however, that mentorship became dependence. She studied him, learned his tactics, mirrored his tone, and absorbed his skill in manipulating perception until she could wield it as well. And now that very skill that once empowered her has become a cage, keeping her locked in because she knows just how dangerous he can be and how quickly he can turn a story against anyone who challenges him. What once felt like partnership has grown into competition, and Ryan views any hint of Blake reclaiming her own agency or eclipsing his career as betrayal. Control has always been his language, and any independent move she makes reads to him as insubordination. That dynamic has never faded. It has only grown more feral with time. The lawsuit and its public spectacle have merely amplified it. Even as Blake fights publicly, Ryan is fighting privately to protect his image, ensuring the world never sees him as the villain. Industry sources reveal that the lawsuit has taken a toll on both of them, financially, emotionally, and professionally. But the damage that is hardest to measure is quieter, the erosion of trust. They no longer treat each other as partners. They see one another as liabilities. Ryan's decisions have reportedly alienated allies, while Blake's refusal to confront him head-on has left her isolated, trapped between loyalty and survival. She has lost her middle ground. To break free, she would have to admit that the man she defended for years may have used her as a shield. And that truth, more than any public scandal or tabloid headline, is the most painful of all. The control, the jealousy, the manipulation. It is all coming to light, piece by piece. And it's no longer just whispers in the industry corridors. It's conversation. The very people who once praised them as the model Hollywood couple are now quietly admitting that they were never what they appeared to be. Behind the perfectly staged smiles was a quiet, unspoken competition. Behind the jokes lay resentment waiting to erupt. And now, as their story nears its inevitable breaking point, the tension is palpable, almost unbearable. Will they continue the illusion until it collapses under its own weight? Or will Blake finally choose herself over the image she helped build, recognizing that the world is no longer rooting for them as a couple, but scrutinizing them as individuals, wondering who will walk away with their reputation intact? Ryan continues to perform, to smile, to act as if the cracks aren't there, but the world can see them now. Blake, the woman who once fell for his intelligence and his strategic mind, may finally be realizing that the very qualities that drew her in are the same ones that keep her trapped in a story she no longer wants to live. The stage lights are dimming. The audience grows restless. For the first time in their carefully constructed narrative, there is no script left to follow. Only truth waiting to be told. Once it comes out, there will be no going back. The story no longer feels like a single event or isolated scandal. It has become a mirror reflecting the fragile architecture of power, fear, and fame. The echoes of years spent meticulously crafting their image now ripple across headlines and private conversations, where nobody dares to speak too loudly, for every whisper could carry a price. This moment forces everyone involved to confront a difficult question. What does it mean to be seen, to be believed, and to be safe from judgment? As the courtroom lights dim and the cameras stop rolling, one truth remains. The people who once tried to bury the narrative now find themselves buried in it. Every denial, every attempt to rewrite the story only fed the storm until it became too vast to contain. Now, no matter what side anyone stands on, there is a shared understanding that nothing will ever return to the way it was before. There is no going back because the masks have cracked. And what lies beneath is neither beauty, nor fame, nor victory, but something far more human and haunting. Silence, it seems, can be louder than confession, and the truth always finds a way to escape its cage. Slowly, inexorably, it leaks through the polished walls of Hollywood, through every public statement and every private contradiction. The ending is not resolution. It is reckoning. Even those who once believed themselves untouchable can be shaken, and once a story begins to unravel, no one truly controls how it ends. What began as a tale of glamour and success has transformed into an unfiltered portrait of fear, regret, and revelation. The final act strips away every illusion that once defined these people, leaving only the stark reality. Power without accountability is fragile, and fame without integrity is fleeting. What lingers in its wake is not anger, but exhaustion, a deep collective sigh marking the end of an era where silence was currency and image was everything. The glossy headlines that once shaped public perception have lost their power. The audience has learned to read between the lines, to question, to resist manipulation. This collapse is not merely a personal downfall, it is a cultural turning